We're in 2 Kings chapter 8. 2 Kings chapter 8. Let's pray together. Our God and our Father, we're so thankful for this, another first day of the week. We're so thankful for the blessings of this past week, Holy Father. Thankful for the food that we've had, our clothing that's kept us warm, our good means of transportation, the homes in which we live. But more importantly, Holy Father, we're so thankful for the relationship that we have had with you during this past week. A fellowship that's made available because of what Christ did when he died on the cross in our place. Thank you for loving us, Holy Father. Thank you for your providence as it relates to our life. We trust in you in regards to that. Thank you for Jesus who loves us, and thank you for the Spirit who loves us and has provided your word. As we studied that this morning, we pray that we would learn much from the things that happened so many years ago and take these lessons, Holy Father, combine them with the things that we've learned before, and let our lights shine before others to be an encouragement to others and help others along the way. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's be reminded regarding the study that we're a part of at this time that after the Israelites came out of Egyptian bondage, there was a period of time in which they were under the leadership of judges, and then they transitioned out of judges to the point of having kings. They had 3 kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, over a period of 120 years, thereabouts total, where they were united. They just had one king, and they were all 12 tribes of Israel united under that king until Solomon's reign ended, and that's when the kingdom was divided. And we noted that when the kingdom divided, you had 10 tribes who migrated, in essence, to the north under the leadership of Jeroboam. He's the king up there first. He'll also be the standard by which all evil kings are measured. And in the south, you had the son of Solomon, Rehoboam. And of course, all kings that are righteous will be held to the standard of David. You had a capital city in the northern 10 tribes of Samaria, the city, and you had a capital city in the southern 2 tribes, Judah. When we concluded 1 Kings chapter 22, we basically at that point in time had sort of been flipping, kind of trying to keep up with, okay, this is a king of Israel. Okay, now we're back down to a king of Judah. But during the first 8 chapters of 2 Kings, also dealing with Elisha, the prophet, we've been dealing just with the northern 10 tribes. But in this chapter, that will change, and we'll go back to having to kind of keep up with, is this a king of the north or is this a king of the south? We know that if it's a king of the north, there'll never be one in the north that's righteous. But there will be a few in the southern kingdom that will be. Elisha, in verse 7, 2 Kings chapter 8 and verse 7, he came to Damascus. Ben-Hadad, he is the king of Syria. These would be enemies of God's people, or in this instance, it'll be enemies of Israel, the northern 10 tribes. He's sick, and it's told the man of God, Elijah, is come hither. So again, you also see maybe where the relationship has kind of changed. Before, they've been trying to kill Elisha, and now it's almost as though he is sort of accepted. He's not being sought after like he was previously. The king said to this guy, Hazael, take a present in thy hand and go and meet the man of God and inquire of the Lord by him, shall I recover from this sickness? So Hazael went to meet him and took a present with him. And we note that the present is 40 camels' burden. And they came and stood before him and said, the son of Ben-Hadad, thy son Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, has sent me to thee, saying, shall I recover from the sickness. Elisha said to him, "Go, say unto him, you will recover." Howbeit, now the language between him and Hazael, howbeit the Lord has showed me that he shall surely die. And he, that's Elisha, settled Elisha's countenance steadfastly upon him, Hazael. So Elisha settled his countenance, began to stare at him, looked upon him until he, Hazael, was ashamed. And Elisha, the man of God, wept. Well, Hazael asks the question, why are you crying? Verse 12. Why are you weeping? And Elisha answers, because I know the evil that you will do unto the children of Israel. Their strongholds wilt thou set on fire, their young men wilt thou slay with the sword, and you'll dash in pieces their little ones and rip up their women with child. Hazael's response is, but what is thy servant, who is but a dog, that he should do this great thing? And Elisha answered, the Lord has showed me that you'll be king over Syria. He departed from Elisha. He came to his master, who said to him, what did Elisha say? And his answer, well, he told me that you would recover. And it came to pass on the morrow or the next day that he, Hazael, took the coverlet, dipped it in water, spread it on his face so that he died, and Hazael reigned in his stead. Comments on this section down through verse 15. Do you remember this guy, Hazael's name had come up before? In fact, Brother Jim Turner pointed it out back in 1 Kings chapter 19 when we were dealing with Elijah. God had said to Elijah, now Elijah's no longer around when we're over here in chapter 8. He's done departed, right? In a pretty remarkable way. But back in chapter 19, the Lord told Elijah, you go return your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you come, you're going to anoint Hazael to be king over Syria. And, because this will pertain to our study today, Jehu, the son of Nimshi, shall you anoint to be king over Israel. Now that was during the days of Elijah, and Brother Jim pointed out, well, that's kind of strange because we don't really see this happening at this point, and we don't. But we've had two kings, Saul and David, who were also anointed earlier on in their life, but didn't begin to reign to a later period, a later time. So we don't know if that actually happened here. But again, we find that Elisha is going to take over for Elijah. In essence, he's also going to be a son of Elijah, sort of in a prophetic way, in a prophetic lineage sort of way. And so now you just have that being carried out, told to Elijah, but it's being carried out through Elijah's, if the best I can say, through his prophetic lineage. If he hadn't already pre-anointed these people. But this is the person again. This is this Hazael that's been spoken of before back during the days of Elijah. Any comments on what happens in these verses in regards to Hazael and this particular king? Yes. Yes, ma'am.
I was thinking that in the verse where he says, go and tell him you'll surely recover, but he's going to die. And I thought, okay, is that one of those little sentences again that is, or what is that? And then by the time you get to the bottom, Elisha, obviously, this man was going to kill him.
That he did.
He would have recovered.
The question was from the king, am I going to recover from this sickness? And the answer was, yeah, you were going to recover. And obviously it didn't take him long to recover. But in addition to that, Elisha had been shown what this particular man and his heart was already intent on doing. And that was assassinating this king and ruling in his stead, right? Does someone else have a comment over here? Then we move on. In the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel. Now, see, we're going to start switching around. That we're talking about this guy Joram. He's the son of Ahab. These are kings of the northern 10 tribes. Jehoshaphat, he had been a king of the southern 2 tribes, comprised of Judah and Benjamin, what we just call them Judah. Being then king of Judah, his son Jehoram. So we have 2 Jehorams at the same time. The one to the north may be easier to note as Joram or Joram, but we're going to see that this guy Jehoram, even who is a southern king, he'll even be called that. So we just have to be kind of just careful as we go through here to kind of keep up with this. But we now have this Jehoram. He's the son of Jehoshaphat. He's now king of Judah, the southern 2. He's 32 years old when he begins to reign. He reigns 8 years, so he's not going to have a real long reign. Notice the Bible points out that he walked in the ways of the king of Israel. So he's a king of Judah, but he's walking his lifestyle, his acts, his walk. It looks like the kings of Israel, those who were idolaters, as did the house of Ahab. He even refers to one of the most wicked kings of Ahab, and then he even gives us probably the best reason why he looked like one of the kings of Israel, because he had the daughter of Ahab to wife. So you have a southern king who took for himself a wife from the northern idolatrous 10 tribes of Israel. That's just not a good combination. So he did that which was evil in the sight of Jehovah. Even so, there's been a promise that God made. He said, I will not destroy Judah for David, his servant's sake, as he promised to give unto him a lamp for his children always. So although under the reign of Jehoram, things are going to go bad in regards to the southern 2 tribes, God doesn't destroy them for their ungodliness because of the promise that he made to David. Any comments down through verse 19? In his days, the days of Jehoram, the southern king of Judah, Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah and made a king over themselves. Then Joram passed over to Zair and all his chariots with him. He rose up by night. He smote the Edomites that compassed him about, and the captains of the chariots, and the people fled to their tents. So Edom revolted under the hand of Judah. So again, I know in verse 21, I read Joram, but this is still talking about the southern kingdom. So now we've seen both of these guys, Jehorams or Jehorams, also referred to as maybe that was their name in short. I don't know. But that's who we are, because when I get to verse 22, it tells me contextually, Edom revolted under the hand of Judah. And I know that Jehoram, that I've just been speaking of, back up in verse 18 and 19, he's king down here. So Edom revolted under the hand of Judah unto this day. Then did Libnah revolt. So we have all this revolting going on, and now we note that the rest of the acts of Joram or Jehoram, the king of Judah, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? If we're talking about the king of Israel, that would have said kings of Israel, but it's Judah. So he dies, slept with his fathers. He's buried with his fathers in the city of David. Another clue, we're talking about the southern kingdom, but his son Ahaziah now begins to reign in his stead. Verse 25, in the 12th year of Joram, now we're just flipping back up to the north. He's the son of Ahab. He was a king of Israel. That's the 10 northern tribes. At that point in time, did this guy Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, begin to reign. 22 years old was he when he began to reign, and he reigns 1 year in Jerusalem. His mother's name is Athaliah. She's the daughter of Omri, and Omri is the dad of Ahab. So again, we're talking about a king who's ruling in the southern 2 tribes, and he has a family connection to the northern 10 tribes. I'm pointing this out just not because, okay, we're going to keep up all these names. I'm not, maybe I will next time when we study it again, I'll be remembered. I'm probably going to forget it between now and then. But you're going to remember that we've had this division, and what's going to happen initially is these 10 northern tribes, they're going to give themselves completely over to idolatry. And the cost is they're going to be carried away into Assyrian captivity. But all the while they're giving themselves over to idolatry, the same thing is beginning to happen, infiltrate the southern 2 tribes. The same thing. And the reason some of these things are happening is not only because of proximity, but because you have marriages taking place between kings, and they're affiliated with this family of idolaters to the north. The influence found its way within these families, and we can just apply those lessons across the board in regards to how careful we need to be just in our everyday relationships with people because of influence and the difficulty there. Satan is so deceptive in regards to how he works in that regard. He walked, we're talking about Ahaziah, verse 27, he walked in the way of the house of Ahab. Even though he's a king of the southern tribe, because of the influence, because of his lack of faithfulness, convictions, he did that which evil in the sight of Jehovah, as did the house of Ahab. For he was the son-in-law of the house of Ahab. And he went with Joram, the son of Ahab, to war against Hazael. He's king of Syria. He's the guy that assassinated Ben-Hadad at Ramoth Gilead. And the Syrians wounded Joram, northern tribe king. And King Joram returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had given him at Ramah, when he fought against Hazael, king of Syria. And Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, he went down to see Joram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel because he was sick. So they have this affiliation with each other. Any comments down? Yes, Brother George.
So in verse 23, the Joram there is actually the Jehoram of verse 16.
Yes, sir.
Wonder why the writer swapped the names around, because it's certainly confusing to the reader. You made that point when you read verse 16, that he would be referred to as Joram later on. You really got to pay attention to who's who here.
We do, and I think probably this section through here may be the most challenging, just because you have 2 kings, as we've alluded to already, who had this same name. And obviously, that longer name was sometimes abbreviated and shortened for whatever reason. And Brother George, you're right in regards to how challenging it is, but at the same time, if you read through these chapters 4 or 5 or 6 times and look for the clues, especially when they die, where are they buried? They're referred to as far as the kings of what? Once you read all that, that kind of helps with that. Kathy.
I've just learned over the years to pay more attention to what's in the context, and that's helped me. Maybe this is just a way for us to really understand the context instead of looking deeper.
You bet.
And not just in this area, but throughout.
Kathy just makes the point that, again, we maybe focus more on what these men did or did not do, which we tried to point out in regards to the marriages that you have a couple of kings making in the southern tribe. Of all things, nobody with enough wisdom saying, hey, whatever you do, don't marry them, because that is not going to, I don't care how politically correct it looks and what you think it's going to do in regards to blessing you, in regards to your kingdom, it ain't going to work out because of the influence that's there. So we look more at maybe the fallout and the lessons we can learn from that, as opposed to trying to remember who was whose son and who was whose dad, uncle, so forth and so on. Alex, and then brother.
In regards to this passage and the confusion that may come from it, it's very intentional when you read through it to see that the point of having multiple kings with the same name or extremely similar names is we're not supposed to necessarily see them as different, but the point is these kings are basically the same. They're both evil. They both turned against God into idolatry. The point is neither side of the border is better than the other at this point. They are equally evil at this point in time.
Brother Alex just points out that, again, in regards to the kings, both are evil. And again, we focus on their evil deeds to learn from that. Yes, sir.
You have alternate spellings of the same word. I run into that all the time with my name. People have to ask me how to spell my name because some people don't spell it the same way. So someone may write my name, but write it with the other spelling. Imagine being a scribe that's copying this, and they're trying to keep it straight. In fact, you even have the Septuagint doesn't even have the section in verse 16 about when Jehoshaphat was king of Judah. So that may have even gotten added at some point.
Sure.
So as we understand that things got copied and there were more than one way of spelling things, that may have even been some confusion as well. But I think Alex makes a good point. When we look at the context, what's the subject of the whole section? Once we identify that subject that we're talking about, then we realize that some of this confusion can kind of just fall to the wayside.
That's right. And if we would just remember that we wouldn't be here. Now, maybe this is where we begin to try and learn whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning. We would not be here. You wouldn't have a divided kingdom, and you wouldn't have kings that are idolaters marrying other kings' daughters who are idolaters. If these kings would have done what God told them to do in the beginning, and that is once they became king, first thing I want you to do is I want you to write you a copy of the law. And then I want you to keep that law in close proximity to you, and I want you to be familiar with all the things that are written in it. Now, you just think about that. Had Saul done that, his life doesn't end like it did. Had Solomon done that, his life doesn't end like it did. And now you don't have a divided kingdom. You don't have Jeroboam to the north. You just have Rehoboam to the south, who's writing a copy of the law to himself, and he's reading it on a daily basis. And he keeps Israel out of idolatry because he finds that to be the sin that God is going to condemn them for. Now, you see the lesson for us? I've never written a copy of it. I don't have to. And I'm kind of thankful because I don't have really good handwriting. But I have access to multiple copies. The charge I have to keep myself free of idolatry is I have to be familiar with what is written therein. But you want to see the deception? The deception is Satan comes along and he's going to tell you and I, you don't have time for that. I'm telling you, you sure don't have time for it over the next couple of weeks. So it remains closed, and I remain ignorant to the warnings, to the admonitions, etc., that are found therein. You see? Comments? We say, well, Robert, I don't have 4 or 5 hours. I don't either. I don't have 4 or 5 hours every day. I mean, I'd never get anything else done. Some days I don't have 4 or 5 hours extra in addition to the number of hours I work every day. I got some time, though. I got 5 minutes. I got 10 minutes. I got 2 or 3 minutes at my computer at work that I can pause for a second when the phone's not ringing and nobody's in the pharmacy. I can look at a verse. I can think about it for half a minute. So, well, that doesn't seem like a lot. Well, no, it's not a lot. No. But it's in a constant awareness that I need to be coming back to the very thing that will steer me away and protect me from the evil one and keep me in fellowship with my Father. Elisha the prophet called one of the sons of the prophets, chapter 9, so he has others. We know that there's others because if we just went back a chapter or two, they didn't have room for everybody. Chapter 6, we're growing, all these sons of prophets. Let's add on. And of course, they went to go cut some wood, and you can go back and remember what happened to somebody's axe as far as the iron part was concerned and how they found that when it got lost in the water. Well, now you have one of these sons of the prophets, and he's given a charge. Get dressed, take this vial of oil, go to Ramoth Gilead, and when you come there, guess who you're going to find there? Jehu. He's the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi. You go in, you make him arise from among his brethren. That's where he's going to be, sitting with them. You take him to an inner chamber. You take this vial of oil, you pour it over his head, and you tell him this: I have anointed thee king over Israel. Then you open the door and you run. Don't you stay there. I don't know. I thought about that. Up to that point in time, I probably would have been pretty excited about this particular charge that Elisha was giving me. But when he said, once you do that, don't you stay, you run, I kind of thought, well, why? Why can't I stick around? Anyway, the young man went to Ramoth Gilead. When he came, behold, the captains of the host were sitting, just as he had said they'd be found. And he said, I have an errand to thee, O captain. And Jehu, who's the captain, says, well, who's it for? And he says, you. Verse 5. So he, Jehu, arose, went with him, and he, this son of the prophet, poured the oil on his head, and he says to him, not only what Elijah had told him initially, but obviously he had told him more things, or somehow he came to know this. Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, I've anointed you king over the people of Jehovah, even over Israel. And the reason I've done this, the purpose you have been appointed, is because of what's said in verse 7. You shall smite the house of Ahab, thy master, that I may avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all servants of Jehovah at the hand of Jezebel, the wife of Ahab. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every man child, and him that is shut up, and him that is left at large in Israel. I will make the house of Ahab like unto the house of Jeroboam. Remember, all descendants were wiped out, and so was the house of Baasha. And also, verse 10, the dogs shall eat Jezebel in the portion of Jezreel, the city, and there shall be none to bury her. And he opened the door and ran. Well, Jehu comes forth. You can imagine he's left these other servants, his brethren, in this room. They were just hanging out, eating, what have you, talking about things. He came back, and one of them said, is everything okay? Is it all well? And then note, as far as what they thought regarding this son of the prophet, this one Elisha had sent, wherefore came this mad fellow to thee? Now, in this moment, they consider him mad, crazy. And his answer was, well, you know the man and what his talk was. And their answer is, it is false, or it is a lie. That they, even if it was a lie, we want to know what he said. Why'd you go into that room? And he said, well, thus and thus spake he to me, saying, thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. And they hasted and took every man his garment, put it under him on top of the stairs, and they blew the trumpet, and they said, Jehu is king. So in a moment, they believe this guy is mad. The next moment, once they hear what this madman has told Jehu, they go, okay, you're king. So Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. That's the king of the north. Brother George would say he could also be known as Jehoram. Either works. He was keeping Ramoth Gilead, he and all Israel. Because why? Because Hazael, king of Syria. But Jehu was returned, remember, in Jezreel, because he had suffered in battle when he fought against the king of Hazael, verse 15. So Jehu says to those who now know he's to be king, if you mean that, verse 15, latter part, then let none escape, nobody goes out of the city. We're not taking any chances that this word gets to Jezreel before I do. So Jehu rode in a chariot. He is the only one at this point in time, seemingly, other than the ones he's told this to. But as he leaves the city, he's not going to be by himself. We'll see that in a moment. As he leaves the city with whoever goes with him to go to Jezreel, he's the only one that knows what's getting ready to happen. Why did he go there? Because that's where Joram was. He's there. He's recovering from his wounds that he suffered in battle. And we remember that Ahaziah at the end of chapter 8 had come down, he's king of Judah, to visit Joram. So he happened to be there. And we'll see as we read the next section that he actually goes with him. So they're on their way. Now we're in the city of Jezreel, and there's watchmen that are standing in the tower. And he sees somebody coming, the company of Jehu. And I see company. There's people coming. And Joram, the king, remember, he's wounded. That's why he's there. He says, take a horseman, send to meet them. Let him say, is it peace? Are you coming in peace? So one goes out to meet this company of Jehu and said, are you coming in peace? And Jehu just says, what hast thou to do with peace? Turn thee behind me. And the watchman now, who's watching this whole thing unfold, said, well, I saw the messenger come to him, but he hasn't come back. In fact, it looks like he's just fallen in ranks, falling in behind him. He said, well, it can't be the case. Send another one. Verse 19. So he came to him, same question, is it peace? Jehu's answer is exactly the same. Turn thee behind me. The watchman said, he came to them, but he isn't coming back either. And then he says, and the driving, the riding, it looks like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he driveth furiously. So now there's some identification being made in regards to who it seemingly might be. So the king said, make ready. They made ready his chariot, and Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, he's there with him. King of Judah went out, each in his chariot, and they went out to meet Jehu and found him in the portion of Naboth the Jezreelite. Well, who's that? Is he still alive? Naboth? Remember, Naboth owned a vineyard, and that vineyard was adjacent to where Ahab lived in the palace. And so Ahab, the king, just approached him one day and said, hey, I'll pay you, or I'll give you another vineyard better than this vineyard. And Naboth said, I ain't selling. This has been in my family forever. So he goes home and he pouts. And his wife sees him pouting. She said, what you pouting for him? He tells her why he's pouting. And she says, why are you pouting? You're the king. So she conspires against Naboth, gets somebody to testify falsely, and they kill him. And Ahab gets his vineyard. Now, Ahab got that vineyard because seemingly not only did he kill Naboth, but he also killed his descendants. He gets the vineyard. He now becomes the owner of that vineyard in the eyes of people, and yet in the eyes of God, who does that vineyard still belong to? It still belongs to Naboth because it didn't rightfully belong to Ahab or anybody else. Well, that's where he's going to be. Came to pass when Joram saw Jehu, his question that he asked Jehu now is, are you coming in peace? And Jehu's answer is, what peace so long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many? Seemingly Joram's heart sank within him, probably Ahaziah's as well. The words out of Joram's mouth is, we better get out of here. We better run, flee. This is treachery, O Ahaziah. So they're turning and running, not running, they're in their chariots. And Jehu drew the bow, his bow with full strength. You see what his intentions are, not to wound. He drew his bow with full strength, smote Joram between his arms, and the arrow went out at his heart, and he sunk down in his chariot. He dies. Jehu says to Bidkar, his captain, you cast him in the portion of the field of Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember how that when I and you rode together after Ahab his father, Jehovah laid this burden upon him. Surely I have seen the blood of Naboth. We know how he was killed because the Bible told us about that. But then we wondered, well, if he was killed, wouldn't the vineyard then go to his descendants? If he had some, seemingly it just wouldn't automatically go to Ahab. But the reason it didn't go to his descendants is because what had Ahab done? He says, I have seen yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, saith Jehovah, and I will requite this plat. I will requite thee in this plat, saith Jehovah. Now therefore take and cast him into this portion of ground according to the word of Jehovah. Ahaziah, the king of Judah. Remember, he had gone down. Verse 16, the latter part of that, that just kind of shows you the accuracy of the Bible. And altitude, he had gone down from where he was to where the king was. Well, Ahaziah is running for his life too. He goes by, or he flees into the garden house. Jehu followed after him and told them, smite him also in the chariot. And they did. He fled to Megiddo and died there. And his servants carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem. He's a king of Judah. And buried him in the sepulchre with his fathers in the city of David. Comments? Some revenge. In the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, began Ahaziah to reign over Judah. These were things we already had recognized, but again, the verse is put there for us. Jehu came to Jezreel. Now, Jezreel's already kind of been a city we've talked about before. In fact, if we went back and looked at what happened in regard to Elijah, after that great battle that he won for God against the idol, the Baal worshipers and the prophets of Baal, there had been a drought, and he told Ahab it's going to rain, and he outran Ahab, and Ahab returned to a city where his wife was, Jezebel, and that happened to be the city of Jezreel. When Jehu was come to Jezreel, well, guess who he would expect to find? Well, Jezebel heard of it. She's there. That's where she's been. She painted her eyes and attired her head and looked out the window. And Jehu entered at the gate and said, she says, is it peace, thou Zimri, thou master's murderer? And he lifted up his face to the window and said, who is on my side? Who? And there looked out to him 2 or 3 eunuchs, seemingly up in the same vicinity, as we're going to see that she is, seemingly servants of hers. There looked out to him 2 or 3 eunuchs, and he said to them, throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall, some on the horses, and he, Jehu, trod her under foot. When he was come in, he did eat and drink. Seemingly, he's not bothered by this death. And he said, see now to this cursed woman and bury her, because in all honesty, she is a king's daughter. And they went to bury her, and they found no more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. Wherefore they came back and told him, and he said, this is the word of the Lord. which he spake by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, in the portion of Jezreel shall the dogs eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the body of Jezebel shall be as dung upon the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel, so that they shall not say, this is Jezebel. Comments?
That body will be resurrected too.
That body, that body will be resurrected too. There's not a body. There's not a body that's going to have been lived in, that no matter how that body has died, will not be resurrected. The Bible says that her skull and her hands and her feet, that was all that was left. That means everything else was consumed by the dogs, digested by the dogs, processed by the dogs. There's no body left, but there will be a body resurrected. Do you remember when we watched the space shuttle, seemingly all going fine? Maybe 1987, 6. And just a moment later, it just all blows up. Did they recover any bodies? They did not. Do you know through the years when they've been on ships a long time ago and you died during the voyage, they wrapped you up and guess where you were sent? Overboard. And guess what food you became? Eventually you were broken down and became fish food. Everybody will be raised. In fact, Jesus even said, marvel not at this. For the hour comes in which all that are in the tomb shall hear his voice and shall come forth, they that have done good unto the resurrection of life, and they that have done evil to the resurrection of judgment. John chapter 5, 28 and 29. In the book of Revelation, you have books that are being opened. You have death. You had all, I saw the dead, the great, and the small. You don't have anybody excluded from here. And if I have a hard time understanding, well, how on earth could God raise a body that's now been consumed in dogs and become waste in that? Well, what can he not do? He spoke the body into existence in the beginning just by saying, let there be man. And the body was created along with all the organs and stuff just working perfectly. And when they lay us in the grave, if that's how it ends up happening, and we lay in that coffin for however long we do, and eventually become dust, from dust thou art, from to dust thou shalt return. There's no body in that casket, but there is a spirit, there is who you are, living somewhere, waiting that day when the power of God will join those two together again, and that body will be raised and changed into one of two types of bodies, one like his, glorious, one not like his, non-glorious. That's where it's all headed. That's the power of God. That's the day we're anticipating. When we partake of the unleavened bread and the fruit of the vine, we're not only remembering what the Lord has done for us, and not only are we reflecting on our past week and how we've lived before him, we're also being admonished and being reminded by the brethren around us that they believe as I do, but I'm also partaking of that in expectation. I can't wait for that to happen. Yes, I have things to do till that happens, things I'd like to see happen. I'd like to see the grandkids just continue to grow. I'd like to just keep hanging out with Kath as long as I can. That doesn't take away from the anticipation I have of that day, of his return. Because I know, just like the Apostle Paul said, when that day comes, it will be very far better. No more separation. One eternal day, living with the Father, Son, Spirit, holy angels, and all the faithful through the ages. You really think something here is better than that? And so if that stirs your emotion, which I hope it does, and I hope you would just be joining me saying, that's exactly what I want, then let me just go back and remind us that, yes, over the next couple of weeks when things are crazy and busy as all get out, and it's all about family and getting together and exchanging gifts, so forth and so on, that, yes, I still have time to be mindful of the standard to which I'm to live. And if I love the Lord my God with all my soul, all my strength, and all my might, I will make time because I love his word. If I love him, I love this because he's given me that. Well, I don't know how I got off on that. I think that was Kathy's fault because she said something about that body. But that's a great point. You don't have to worry about this body. I see your body. You see mine. I got a haircut yesterday. It's not hard to tell, but there's just not a lot left up there. I see a cat take a picture of us or something, and I see myself. And I see what's happening. I can look at you. No offense to any of you. I'm thankful. I'm grateful to know you. But there's a change taking place, and it's the outward man that is decaying. But I am so grateful to God that every day I can renew that inward man, and I can keep building him up and preparing him for that day. And there won't be any of that effort. I'm going to tell you, there won't be any of that effort that you're going to consider or I'm going to consider a wasted effort when we get to heaven. It will not been for naught. It would have just meant everything to us. Plus, it would have made our life here more fulfilling. We will pick up next week, 2 Kings chapter 10, because Ahab, as far as him and his descendants, it's not over with just yet. 2 Kings chapter 10. Thank you for your comments and your questions.